Hello everybody, my name is Grondious and I will be your runner today for Cuphead. This is a game made in 2017 by Studio MDHR. It is an action-packed, boss-focused platformer, and it was inspired, the art style, by 1930s cartoons. Every frame of animation in this game was hand-drawn. It's a beautiful, wonderful game. I'm very much looking forward to running it for you all today. Joining me on commentary is Jason2890.
Hey everyone.
And without further ado, let's just get this going. I'm gonna do a 5 countdown, and then we'll start the time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. All right. So I think the first thing that we might want to explain is you might see this version 1.1 plus thing. Maybe you could kind of go over that, Jason. What the deal is with the versions in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 3 main versions of the game. For those of you that are a little familiar with Cuphead speedrunning, you're probably used to watching the Legacy version, which makes use of the weapon swap glitch, which basically completely decimates bosses. You're effectively shooting 2 weapons at once. This is the version immediately after they patched that out of the game. So it is a little bit slower than the Legacy version, but it focuses a lot more on movement tech and making sure every one of your shots counts. It's still not a slow run by any means, even though the weapon swap glitch is patched out, but it is definitely a lot of tech and a little less focus on glitch execution. But you'll see right now the level Grondious is playing is the only platforming level of the run. This is called Forest Follies. Actually, probably one of the harder levels of the runs, where people tend to reset a lot. But Grondious is doing this to get enough coins to purchase the weapons that we're going to use for the rest of the run. Coming up, there is a frame-perfect trick that you can clip under the floor of the Acorn Maker.
Got it.
So Grondious is going to give that attempt. Nice.
Nice.
Very
Good
nice.
follies.
Yeah, it saves you, that clip under the Acorn Maker saves probably about 4 seconds.
Yeah, and coming up, we're going to be getting our first 2 weapons. There was actually a route change. We used to take pea shooter spread, but now we take this extra time to do follies to get more coins so we can buy lobber and spread. Maybe you can kind of go over like why these 2 weapons are so perfect for speedrunning. Yeah,
the reason why they're the best weapons to use in this version of the game is because lobber has a kind of a glitch that we discovered fairly late into speedrunning this game, where the EX attack for it, which is the kind of like the super move for it, actually does double damage if you hit the enemy with the splash damage of the weapon instead of with direct impact. And it also comes in handy during boss transitions to shoot a bunch of lobbers up where the boss is going to spawn, because they stay on screen for a while and you can kind of get a bunch of damage on the boss all at once when they appear. And then spread is naturally a good choice because it's the highest damaging weapon. It's very short range, but it has the highest DPS, and the other glitches aside, it has the highest damaging EX attack as well.
Okay, so moving on into the root pack.
Yeah, we're going into the root pack here. This is 3 bosses: the potato, onion, and the carrot. You'll see already some use of that tech I was mentioning. Grondious is shooting lobber EXs at the feet of these enemies, and he's setting up a lobber trap for the onion whenever he appears on screen. There's actually kind of a trick here. If you line up in a pixel perfect position and shoot an EX attack where it hits the ground and the boss on the same frame, it actually does triple damage, which you see Grondious make use of that there on the onion and the potato. And then sets a lobber trap for the carrot up here, just jumps up a lot, shoots some EXs, and makes short work of this boss.
Nice. I made sure to fail the shop skip there, just so you have more time to talk. Totally intentional. Oh, dude, a 36.
Nice, man. That's a really solid time. The boss coming up next is Ribby and Croaks, and they're kind of inspired by Ken and Ryu from Street Fighter. There's a lot of references to other games in here because the creators of this game, Jared and Chad Moldenhauer, are very big fans of a lot of old games. But you'll see their attacks and their poses are very reminiscent of Ken and Ryu.
Yeah, you'll see some Hadoukens here in just a second, hopefully.
And there's some really cool tech too that we discovered in this game, or in this fight, where if you crouch down at their feet, like Grondious is doing right here, you actually do double damage to them. You're able to hit both sprites at the same time. And Grondious is going to do this to try to trigger what's called the super skip. And he's taking some intentional damage just to stay in the double damage spot for a little bit longer than normal, and that forces the boss to go right from phase 1 to phase 3. So you see this glitch animation where they kind of rolled into each other from the same side that normally doesn't happen that way. But of course, we're in 1 HP going to the final phase. This gives you 1 of 3 possible patterns, and Grondious is going to try to one-cycle this. Watch the master at work here.
Oh my god. It's such a stressful fight. You have to go down to 1 HP there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was very, very well played, though. You see, he made more use of that splash damage, double damage lobber EXs by shooting those directly at the ground. Looks a little silly, looks counterintuitive, but it gets the job done.
Yep, and coming up here in just a few seconds, we have Goopy, which has some very interesting glitch that we discovered, or tech, you could say.
Yeah, there's actually a sprite of the second phase for Goopy stored off screen, and during the first to second phase transition, the game actually swaps the sprite in. And if you're able to shoot a Lobbery X right before that happens and have it linger on screen just long enough for the sprite swap to take place, it actually does quadruple damage for like maybe a 3-frame window. So Grondious is going to try to do that as well. This boss is not that challenging. This is probably one of the easier bosses in the run, mostly just jumps around the screen. But you'll see also it's kind of reminiscent of Dragon Quest, kind of like the slimes from that game.
Great series. Oops.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I barely missed the quads there.
Yeah. It was close, though. It was still a really good fight.
Now we're going to be coming up
almost instantly there.
On the plane levels, which are kind of like a completely different part of the game. I think there's 6 of these. Or 5, rather.
There's 5. Yeah, there's 5 that we do in this route. But yeah, the plane levels, they play more like shoot 'em ups rather than the boss fights that we've seen so far. And unlike on the regular levels here, you don't get to use the weapons that you purchased at the shop, so you won't be seeing any lobbers spread in the air. You just have use of the machine gun, and then later on you'll pick up the mini bombs, which we'll use for another pretty major game-breaking glitch to do a ton of damage later. But you'll see going into this fight, this boss is named Hilda Burg. There's not too much tech to talk about this boss. You mostly just follow the boss and just try to hit all of your bullets. There are 2 intentional damage boosts that Grondious is going to try to take here, where he's able to shoot missile EXs as Hilda's going across the screen from left to right. And that just keeps your missile EX on the boss for a longer amount of time to ensure that it does a lot of extra damage.
Maybe some slightly unintentional damage on the second one.
Hey, no worries.
I mean, maybe that could be a new strat. A really bad new strat.
There is a little bit of RNG in this. So this second transformation that she did, where she turned into Sagittarius there shooting the arrows, there's a chance that she could turn, it's 50-50 chance that she'll turn into Gemini instead, which is a little more desirable. It's a little easier to dodge, keep making constant damage, but it's not too much of a difference either way. And then one other small thing to note is that during this phase transition where she's grabbing her head like this, she's actually invulnerable, but she still appears to be taking damage. You can still build cards, but there's no, there's not going to be any point in using supers there or anything because she's just actually not taking damage. Now this final phase here.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah. Grondious is trying to shoot missile EXs very specifically on these UFOs because there's a chance that the missile EX will clip on the UFO and kind of get stuck there for a few extra frames, and that compounds the damage.
One cool thing that's worth mentioning. Oh, thank you. One thing that's worth mentioning is I'm actually using keyboard for the plane levels and controller for the normal levels. It's kind of this weird hybrid thing. I think only I do.
Yeah, he's the only one that does it. We got some keyboard players. We got some controller players. We don't have anyone that does both.
Yeah, and it's because it helps me with this Luigi swap thing. We'll be talking about here in a little bit once we get mini bombs.
It's a glitch later, but now coming up, we have a fan favorite boss, one of my favorite, sure, Cagney Carnation. He's got some sweet dance moves and sweeter music, but it's actually not too bad of a fight. He can get bad RNG here.
Which we're getting.
Yeah, obviously. Grondious is the king of getting the bad RNG in this, where he starts with the seed attack here, because it's just a lot of stuff on screen to dodge, and usually has to waste a little bit of damage killing off these little minions so that they don't hurt him. But he handles it like a champ, of course. He's got to dodge a couple more attacks here, and then he's going to be moving on to the final phase in just a moment. Oops. And you'll also notice something, these pink variables that show up on screen, we actually tend to not get them in a speedrun because it's a very small optimization where on the score screen, very nice kill, by the way.
Thank you.
On the score screen, if you end up having to skip the line where it says parries, it ends up saving close to a second. So most of these fights, we're opting to intentionally skip getting those parries because they usually don't give you enough time save to offset the scoreboard time save.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of time saves to be had in the scoreboard. Like, one thing, for example, is there's like one frame where if you press the A button, both the stars on skill level appear at the same time. We call it star skip instead of one at a time, and it actually saves almost a full second. So I'm always like mashing my heart out, hoping to get that. Now would be is now a good time for messages, I should say.
Yeah, of course. We have $10 donation from Mocha saying, "Go Grondious, make ESA chat PogChamp, and more importantly, have fun." Good luck, dude, and make the devil pay the price and let him PogChamp at your skills. Maybe get world record? Whoops, I jinxed it.
Thank you, Maka.
And we got a $30 donation from Kirtar saying, Yo, Grondious, you're doing great so far. Keep it up. P.S. Not to jinx it, but I have a feeling you will have a spiderless devil fight. People are really trying to jinx you in these donations.
So something about this fight's kind of flown by while we are going through that, but there's actually a high degree of RNG in this fight where Baroness sends out 3 minions, but she has 5 different ones that she can send out. Grondious got pretty average RNG there, but there are some minions that have more amounts of health and take longer to disappear off screen. So,
and you see just cool use of like the lobber traps and actually shooting lobber EXs up in the air so that they fall and explode right as the next mini boss comes in, just to maximize that damage.
Yeah. And now coming up, we have the second plane fight, which is going to be Wally Warbles. Very difficult fight. He'll be going cuckoo trying to get all that damage on him. But before that, we're going to be picking up some mini bombs from this guy over here, and that's the second weapon for the plane levels. Now, there's an interesting thing you could do. We call it Luigi swaps, named after a member of our community that found the trick initially. But if you do a frame-perfect button press when you swap weapons and press the EX attack at the same time, it allows you to shoot your EX while you're shooting your primary weapon, which normally the game stops you from being able to do that. So you can't do that until you have a secondary weapon on the plane levels, of course. So Grondious is going to make very good use of that and try to end these phases as quickly as possible. This is actually an extremely difficult boss, and Grondious is probably the best at this boss in the community for sure. And another interesting thing too, the mini bombs are actually a little weaker than the machine gun. So you'll see he's going to try to use the machine gun as often as possible, other than whenever he's doing these Luigi swaps. And the game actually intends on this final phase here. And speaking of which, there's a quick pause that he did, which actually spawns the final phase in a little bit quicker. No one's sure exactly why it works. But the game seems to intend for you to stay above Wally in the final phase here, just to drop mini bombs on him since you just got that weapon. But we discovered it's actually faster to just stay on the bottom left and shoot those missile EXs since he has such a wide hitbox.
Yeah, that a lot of the like whether you use like the bullet EX or the mini bomb EX just depends on, you know, the width of the hitbox, because you're gonna get a lot more ticks on those bullet EXs if it's a bit thicker.
Yeah, those bullet EXs they actually do damage. They don't have a set amount of damage, but they do a certain amount of damage per tick. So the more times it ticks on the enemy, the more damage you do. But coming up here, we have Jimmy the Great, which is a very interesting fight. It's a really cool fight. Can't be wishing for extra lives on this guy. But is this gems? This is his first phase. He has one of 3 there. And the second phase here with these wall pieces, you'll see Grondious is shooting 5. He's trying to shoot 5 machine gun bullets prior to shooting a mini bomb, and that's just to maximize his damage, because these wall pieces will die in 6 machine gun bullets. But he wants to over damage them with a mini bomb, since a single mini bomb does more than a single machine gun bullet. And these wall pieces actually damage Jimmy's overall health bar. So the more damage he does on these walls in this section, which is effectively an auto scroller, it ends up shortening the fight considerably. And he was actually able to do so much damage that coffin phase just ended in just a second or two. It's pretty short there. Now this puppet phase, you'll see Grondious is intentionally going to be using the mini bomb EXs just because this puppet has a very thin hitbox, so it ends up being advantageous to use these mini bomb EXs very close to him, just because of how thin the hitbox is. It's the most use of damage. And this final phase here with large Jimmy right here, he's very thick. So you're going to be using these missile EXs. It's thick with 2 C's, you know, THICC.
Yep. When it's thick, man, you got to give it the missile. That's how it is in this game. It's a good speedrun tech. Up and coming is probably like one of the hardest things in the run, so hopefully...
Yeah, this is like the only really major glitch in the runs. This boss might be a clown, but this fight's no joke, that's for sure. But we're going to see the Beppy glitch, which some of you that have seen Legacy speedruns might remember. Basically, what you end up doing, you want to do enough damage to push Beppy to his 3rd phase while he's still in his 1st phase. So Grondious is going to do a very specific setup to get Beppy just on the cusp of transforming into a 2nd phase, and then get him to start another attack, since he can't phase transition mid-attack. So then he's going to try to do enough damage before he moves across to the other side of the screen to trigger the glitch. It's extremely difficult to do on this version of the game. And the glitch phase here is no cakewalk by any means. But this glitch saves about 20 seconds, and now Beppy's just going to be stuck in this phase for the rest of the fight.
Oh my god, almost died.
Yeah, this phase is terrifying.
Yeah, because you usually come into it with 1 HP.
Yeah.
It's the worst. Okay. There we go.
Giving us all heart attacks, man.
Jeez, that fight. Yeah, everything there is super random, so you just have to react and try not to die.
Well played. It's a great time, too. Yeah, like generally, if you don't do this glitch and then play the fight, you end up well over a minute for the time. So there's just very long phase transitions that you end up cutting out completely by doing that glitch.
Yep, and coming up is my personal favorite boss casually, Grim Matchstick.
Yeah, Grim Matchstick has one of the 2 fights that has a really heavy RNG element that people tend to not really like. These clouds that you see at the beginning of this fight, this is the only set position of the clouds in the entire fight. After the screen, the clouds are in random positions, so you have to react very well because no 2 fights are going to be the same for this. So you have to be very, very good at seeing where your platforms are and where you can get to safety while you're doing this fight. Another interesting tidbit, that little castle model you see in the background is actually they actually made a physical model whenever they made this game and then just photographed it from different angles to create the effect of it rotating that they put into the game here. So they did a very good work with the with the art style and with everything in this game.
Oh yeah, they put so much work into this, and it's such a cool and unique game because of that.
One kind of a small piece of tech that you'll see Grondious doing here, since these clouds are moving to the left, he's actually moving to the right occasionally whenever he has to get his bearings again, but he's also stopping every time his lobber is cooled down for him to shoot another shot. So it's very small optimization, but it just ensures that he's getting constant damage. And then Grondious, of course, has to put on a show for all the viewers here by making
okay, we'll call it putting on a show.
As close as possible.
Man, that was such a janky fight, but we got through it. Man, did you see that extra fireball? Normally he's supposed to stop shooting fireballs when he brings out the flame gun thing. Yeah, but he just, he shot an extra fireball there just to keep it interesting. While we're going on to aisle 3 here, is now a good time for any messages?
Sure. We have a $25 donation from Lord Porkbelly with no comment, but quite an interesting name.
Yeah,
and a $20 donation from Unsigned Reality Check saying Finns are here, and I'm quite sure there's probably some Finnish people watching right now. Thank you guys for those generous donations and supporting ESA.
Nice.
Thank you.
Now, this is the beginning of aisle 3. It starts off with Rumor Honeybottoms, which is probably one of the biggest run killers aside from Beppy in these speedruns. It's just very difficult, high skill ceiling fight. And it also suffers from the same issue as Grim, where you have RNG platforms. Now, the game starts with all these platforms you can go on, but later on you'll see there's going to be platforms missing, and it's going to make this fight quite a pain, depending on what RNG Grondious gets here.
Which
luckily gets a somewhat decent pattern.
Oh man, you hate to see it happen.
Hey, it's okay.
All right, we're good. We died early in the fight, so
a little more of this game.
It's RNG manipulation. Don't worry about it. But those platforms, though.
Yeah, the platforms you could make or break this fight for sure.
Okay.
Oh man, just watching this is keeping me on the edge of my seat here. But Rumor Honeybottom cycles through 3 attacks, but depending on what attack she uses first, it determines where the cycle starts. Now, because he got the triangle attack first, now she drops in the middle, and Grondious is going to hopefully be able to do enough damage to end up skipping the final phase entirely. Normally, there's a pretty tricky final phase where she ends up turning to an airplane, and it's very hard to dodge the attacks there, so we try to do enough damage to skip that phase.
Yeah, you could probably see just watching that why this boss is like the biggest run killer. It's so random. Everything's so crazy. You just have to react and just pray at that point.
It's kind of like, this is the mid-run gauntlet between Beppy and Grim and Rumor, and then coming up next, Dr. Cal. It's just a very difficult run of bosses
coming up
here.
Yeah,
this is definitely the hardest plane level Well, I don't know. For me, Wally is, but this is generally regarded as the hardest playing level. And this guy is obviously inspired by Dr. Wily. You'll see in the final phase especially. But the first phase is pretty neat. There's 3 different pieces that you have to destroy to get in the second phase. Ron is going to make short work of them. But he's dropping mini bombs on the bottom too, and that's because he's able to hit both pieces at once with the splash damage. The second phase here, Grondious took that intentional damage just so we can get in position to shoot a missile EX to bring us to final phase, and this is really the bullet hell of the run. There's 2 different gem patterns here, red and blue gems. Red are very, very close together, make dodging pretty tricky. And an interesting thing is that these parries are not in random positions. They're actually able to be manipulated depending on how much screen lag you cause, ironically enough. And if you play this game on just a fresh file here, if you keep it on for too long, it actually messes with the patterns here. But we have it down to a science depending on what pattern we get, where we're going to parry things to make sure the parries are where we want them to be.
Yeah, it definitely took a long time to figure out how to handle that fight. It's come a long way.
That was a great fight, by the way.
Thank you. More heart attacks because I got the red sparks, which is just, that much harder, but we got through it.
This fight coming up, Sally Stage Play, used to be a fight that we kind of just was an afterthought on our runs. We didn't really put much work to the tech for it. It's pretty straightforward, but recently we've had a couple new innovations on this fight to save probably a few seconds and make it a little bit more consistent. Grondious is going to try to end the first phase with an EX if the patterns line up correctly, and that's just to make sure she doesn't end up doing an extra attack in the first phase, because once you do enough damage to trigger the second phase, she's invulnerable until she goes off screen here. And Grondious is standing in a very specific position, so he can shoot a Calabria EX at the beginning of this phase and end up hitting for triple damage. So it's very calculated now in this fight. There's definitely still a bunch of randomness on it, but it ends up making the fight a lot more consistent. So in this phase here, for anyone that's played Final Fantasy VI, this is kind of reminiscent of Kefka, the final boss in that game, but really cool design work. And then the final phase here, Grondious is going to try to kill as soon as possible because it's the hardest phase to hit just because of how high she is and how far she moves around, but he was able to make short work for her there.
And speaking of Final Fantasy VI, we will have a train fight, but unfortunately we cannot suplex it. So
yeah, no suplexes allowed.
Yeah, really unfortunate.
It'd be a cool Easter egg if there was a way to do that.
That would be awesome.
Maybe in the DLC, which is coming out later this year.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Now this next fight, Werner Vermin, makes a lot of use of the tech that we saw a little bit of on Grim, where you kind of flick lobbers back while you're walking away from the boss. You'll see a lot of that in the first phase here. And there's actually a really cool trick in the second to third phase transition that I'll talk about when it comes up here that allows us to hit for quad damage lobbers just because of some janky hitbox stuff.
Yeah, there's some things we try to understand and explain. It's stuff we're just okay, it works. So
we see it happen once, and we just figure out how to do it again.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is actually a really fun fight.
Yeah, it is.
But this second phase here, where Werner's in the middle, Grondious is going to try, whenever he starts doing his third phase transition, to shoot some Calabria EXs diagonally downright from the left side here. And that actually... Yeah, you got some. That's nice. Each one of these Calabria EXs that he's shooting there at that cart is actually doing 4 times damage. We're not sure why. We don't worry about it. It works. So
yeah, you can actually get 5 of those if the fight goes perfectly. I kind of got trolled by the little bottle cap coming out and bumping into me, but I still managed to get 3 in there. So that's still a huge damage increase.
Yeah, that tech alone has allowed us to save like close to 5 or 6 seconds on this fight. And the next boss coming up is Captain Briny Beard, who was actually one of the first bosses designed by Studio HR. They luckily kept him in the final cut because there were a lot of early bosses they ended up scrapping entirely. But really cool fight. There's a lot of RNG involved in this as well. Grondious is going to try to get a 3 cycle to get to final phase. And the first attack is scripted, where it's always going to be Briny pulling out a gun shooting 4 times. But the 2 attacks after that vary. He might pull out his gun again. He might summon some C minions. It all just depends on what pattern he'll give you. But it is possible to 3 cycle on any pattern. So Grondious is going to try his best here. Luckily, he's getting a pretty generous pattern so far, where he's able to just stay there and just jump and just maintain constant DPS on this boss. And then you'll see here, he's able to, nice, very nice. He's able to trigger the final phase here. Now, this part's a little tricky as well. You end up fighting the ship, and Briny falls into the sea back there. But if you don't kill the boss fast enough, he does this laser attack, which has kind of a long transition. But Grondious was able to kill him before you're able to see that, which saves quite a bit of time.
Cool thing there too is I got the squid, and you can actually kill the squid and kind of like trigger either his next attack or the phase transition sooner. So since I knew I did enough damage already, I just used a Calabria X to just kind of just nuke that squid and get to the last phase a little bit quicker.
Yeah, coming up next, we got Calabria, and Calabria is definitely a fan favorite out there. But it's a really cool fight. It's actually quite a bit of randomness in the first phase here. There's a lot of different attacks that she can do, a lot of cool dodging. Just sit back and watch Grondious at work here. So he's actually trying to time these missile EXs for whenever she's opening her mouth, because her hitbox ends up becoming just a little bit wider, that allows you to get an extra tick in of damage. So just some small optimizations we put into this fight. Grondious is playing this fight very well so far. It took a little bit of damage, but that's no problem.
That's
2 HP
fine.
going into the next phase is very nice.
So over here is a cool trick. Look, Ma, no hands!
Yeah. That's something interesting that was discovered that is not useful anywhere other than this fight, but her stone gaze normally stops you from shooting it entirely until you're able to mash enough to get out of the stone. But if you do one of those Luigi swaps that we talked about earlier, just as she's hitting you with stone and then let go of the shoot button entirely, for some reason you continue to shoot. And then in this final phase here, you just stay very close to her face and she just isn't able to hit you. Her attacks all go behind you. Those petrifying gazes and those skulls. Not a danger at all. So if you're trying to get past this boss in casual gameplay and you're stuck on the final phase, that's definitely something that's worth doing just in casual gameplay as well.
Yeah, it definitely looks harder than it is.
And coming up here, Grondious mentioned this fight earlier. The Doom Train, Phantom Express.
Man.
This is a very, very difficult fight that we've optimized quite a lot in the last year, just to try to get one cycles on these. Like, there's 4 distinct phases in this, and each phase we have a very specific way of playing it just to get past it as soon as possible. The first phase is not too difficult here. Basically just stay back here and just kill those eyeballs with the spread damage. But then the second phase is where things get a little crazy, because Grondious is going to want to try to one cycle the second phase, because otherwise, if the head here ends up going back into the train, you lose a couple seconds here. And
nice.
You have to shoot a very specific, very well played, man. You have to shoot a very specific pattern of lobbers there and Calabria X's just to do enough damage to barely do it. In this fight too, the twin phase here, we just have a very specific way of playing this depending on which twin attacks first. Grondious actually got the good pattern here, so this is nice. He's able to kill both heads right on the same side there, almost simultaneous, without taking damage too. And this thing right here we call ghost wrangling. Very new tech. Grondious is keeping this ghost on screen for as long as possible because it has a parry inside, and he's going to parry off of it just to shoot shots a little higher to hit this phase right when it opens up.
Nice. That was a good fight, actually.
Oh, very nice, man. He's able to get the one cycle second phase and the one cycle phase. It's very close to an ideal fight.
Yeah, that fight has just come such a long way. Like, even just getting that one cycle in a skeleton used to be thought to be too hard to even be done in runs. Like, it was like super crazy. We just found all these little ways of like managing it that we were able to get it more consistent. Is now a good time for messages?
Yes, sure. Caught me a little off guard, but we have another donation supporting you there. We have a $10 donation from 2C Plus saying, "Let's go, Grondious. Good luck with the rest of the run, my man."
Hey, 2C, thanks.
Plus. Now, the King Dice fight is actually very interesting because each of these numbers, you have to roll a die here, and each of these numbers has a different mini-boss. So Grondious is going to try to roll the dice specifically to get on bosses 3, 5, and 7. Not necessarily because they're the fastest bosses, but because you end up skipping a dice roll by hitting those 3 bosses specifically, because you only have to land on one safe space to get to the end. And that ends up saving about 6 seconds there alone. These do happen to be very fast bosses as well, which is a nice little bonus. But yeah, it is intended where he's rolling the die. And this cigar here, he's able to get a 2 cycle, which you can do on any pattern, but some of them are a little trickier than others. But Grondious is able to manipulate him to face the left there and shoot some triple damage Calabria X's to make short work from there.
And now, up and coming, we got the rabbit, which is a boss we never thought we'd be doing in a speedrun, but as Jason mentioned, this route is just it takes one less roll, so it's faster.
Yeah, and one really cool optimization we do here, just to make every shot count, is during this fight, you'll see these skulls surround Grondious, and the game leaves a one gap of skulls and intends for you to jump through that. But instead, we just jump up and to the right every time. Squeeze through those skulls right when they spawn before they close in enough, and that's just so we can keep facing the boss and keep getting those shots in.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice fight. Very good RNG, too.
Yeah, it is a really tight jump through there, but you got to get that extra damage in, man. Take those risks.
And the next mini boss is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's horrible.
She has one of two patterns that she could give you, and the desirable one is for her to just stand in place and spin around. But if she moves across back and forth, there's a lot of damage boosting in this fight, but you end up losing a lot more time if she moves back and forth. And naturally, she moves back and forth.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just a little bit harder to line up your shots when she's moving back here. But then,
Not bad.
Once she's standing still and spinning there, it's very, very easy to get a bunch of damage in her and finish the fight. And for anyone that's familiar with Gunstar Heroes, this level is kind of an homage to a level in Gunstar Heroes where you do very similar things, where you end up having to fight certain mini-bosses depending on where you land. Pretty cool. But the actual King Dice fight itself here, if you've struggled with parries earlier in the game, this could be a very, very tough part of the game for you, because you are pretty much forced to parry these cards to stay alive this part. Grondious is going to do enough damage, hopefully, to kill him right before the second set of cards appears here. And yeah, before the second set of cards is able to hit him. And he is able to do that. Very well played.
Thank you, man. And up and coming, we have the final boss. We got to kind of make a decision, though, here. You know, I'm a bit nervous. It's my first marathon run. The devil's got this deal we can make, I heard. You know, it's...
If you're a little too scared, you
we
can
can
just
end the
hand
run
over the
soon.
contracts.
Yeah, I mean, who cares about all those other, you know, citizens of Inkwell Isle or whatever? You know, we could just say yes and end this here. That would be awesome. Oh, I'm thinking about it.
You gotta save everyone. You gotta do that.
All right.
So we're gonna say no to the devil. Everyone, keep that in mind. But keep in mind also, whoever's running the timer, the time is going to be coming up whenever we see knockout on this fight.
Yeah.
But the first phase of this is extremely difficult because there's a lot of random attacks. And nice, Grondious got the best RNG with getting the snake pattern there, because that basically guarantees he's not going to get the spider attack, which ends up wasting a ton of time.
It's awful, yeah.
Yeah. But coming up, there's actually going to be another pause glitch in the first to second phase transition that you'll see soon, just similar to what we did on Wally earlier, where typically there's a little animation that Cuphead. By pausing and unpausing and shooting an EX, you're actually able to regain control and skip that animation entirely, which allows you to start damaging the devil about 2 seconds sooner. But basically, Grondious is just going to try to maintain damage on his eyes. His eyes are the only vulnerable part of this. Doesn't matter which eye you hit. But the third phase here gets a little chaotic, but we're going to ignore all these other enemies spawning and just move on to the final phase with him crying.
And there it is.
Nice run, man. Congrats.
Oh, man. That's Cuphead. Thank you, man. I was running the loadless time on the side. And yeah, that's time, too. Sorry. That was actually would be a 4th place run on the leaderboards with the death there, so I'm really happy with that.
Nice.
Thank you so much to everyone watching. It's really cool to have people that care about speedrunning. And, you know, awesome to have everyone here. Thank you, Jason, for commentating.
Oh, you're very welcome, man. It's a pleasure.
And thank you to ESA for just being generally awesome. Like, everyone was so cool and made it like such a good experience getting into this. And thank you for having me, of course. Do I have time for just like a couple shout outs or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to, as we're going through these slides here at the end, I'd just like to give a big shout out to the Cuphead speedrunning community. They're awesome. I joined them like 2 years ago, and everyone was so kind and helpful. Like SBD Wolf especially, he's an amazing speedrunner. You should check him out. He even recently had a video on IGN where the developers watched his run. But anyways, he was just like answered all my million questions, and everyone was super cool. So go to speedrun.com if you're interested. Go to Cuphead and check out some runs, or on the side you can join our Discord. You're very welcome. I have a beginner intermediate speedrunning guide for this game. So yeah, it'll be very easy for y'all to get into it, and we'd love to have more runners with, especially with the DLC coming out sometime this year. I also just like to give a special thanks to my streaming community, everyone that supported me. You all are the best. It's made the last 4 years of my life so much better. Shout outs to my parents for, doing a good job, hopefully. No, I love them. And shout outs to my friends and my wife. It's so awesome to have someone support you, support what you're passionate about. But yeah, thank you again for having me. And I believe up next we have Skull Jaeger, Revolt of the Westigans by
We
Jangle
do
Storm.
indeed.
Nice. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you so much for being on, and you definitely kept me on the edge of my seat there for most of those fights. Probably everyone else as well.
I almost had a heart attack. Maybe one or two.
Thanks so much for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. So we'll head off to the intermission, and like you said, Skull Jagger will be next. And see ya then.
Yep, see ya, everybody.